Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kaylee Lines.
The layoffs have begun. Welcome to the Friday edition as President Trump's budget chief makes it official, announcing reductions in the federal workforce said to be in the thousands on this day 10 of a government shutdown. And it follows a social media post from President Trump threatening massive tariffs on China, which has now sent stocks sharply lower. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington alongside Michelle Jamrisko, who's in for Kaylee today. Michelle, this has turned into quite a day that we couldn't have planned even this morning. All this is happening as President Trump meets with his doctor at Walter Reed for what's being described as a semi-annual checkup. We do expect to hear from him in the Oval Office later today.
Yeah, happy Friday, Joe. Really,
how about
even though this administration doesn't seem to take Fridays in the same way as maybe previous ones and others have. But yeah, a lot to follow today. We will be tracking, of course, Trump's movements and his planned visit to the Middle East. But in the meantime, we've got a lot to unpack this morning, and the
that's
news
for sure.
keeps coming.
We've got a live report coming your way from the White House. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall is on the North Lawn. We'll also have insights from Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman of California. I'm sure he's going to have some thoughts on these federal worker layoffs. So we're actually going to spend some time as well with Bloomberg Politics contributor, former Republican Congressman Patrick McHenry. Rick and Jeanne are with us this hour as well, so we're going to cover a lot of ground here, and stay with us for the next hour. We start, as always, on Wall Street. Charlie Pellet puts a finer point on what's happening on the markets since the Truth Post. Charlie, how's it look?
Right now, as we recap and reset, Joe Mathieu, stocks lower across the board. Worst level of the day right now on the S&P 500 index. All of this coming down 10:57 a.m. Wall Street time, with President Trump saying he sees no reason to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping and threatened a massive increase of tariffs on goods from China, citing a recent hostile export control on rare earth minerals. China also slapped new port fees on American ships. Stocks straight lower as that news broke. Right now, the S&P again, worst level of the day, down 124 now, a decline of 1.9%. The S&P at 6611. The Dow is down 578. It is down 1.2%. The Nasdaq Composite Index down 588 points, down 2.6%. The 10-year 4.05%, with the 2-year 3.52%. Gold is at $39.80 the ounce, under $4,000, up under 0.1% right now. Silver was trading briefly back above 50. $49.92 on silver, up by 1.3%. And Bitcoin down 2.3%, $118,353. And sources have told Bloomberg that AstraZeneca is expected to announce a deal later today with President Trump to slash drug prices, making it the second pharmaceutical company to strike an agreement to advance one of the president's key health priorities. Pfizer, you recall, was first out of the gate in late September. AstraZeneca lower by 0.4%. Pfizer shares down by 1.2%. Lots of moving parts to this market. We've got you covered here at Bloomberg. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. And back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie Pellet, many thanks. We'll have more from Charlie on the markets in just about 20 minutes' time. We're really connecting the dots here once again between Washington and Wall Street, because this was a positive market with a pretty decent feel on a Friday morning when things started on Wall Street. We have since turned sharply lower since President Trump posted on China, threatening massive layoffs and questioning his looming meeting at the APEC summit with President Xi. And then, of course, the world changed again, only a short time later, when the president's budget chief, Russ Vought, took to Twitter, Michelle Jamrisko, X as I should call it, to say the rifts have begun. That's the headline of the day. Now, we don't have a huge sense of what that means beyond thousands of reductions in the federal workforce.
Well, and we've been waiting for this, Joe. This is one of the moves that has been widely broadcasted. We had no idea when it might happen or how, but we're starting to see it kind of crystallize here. So still a lot of questions about how that'll play out, and as you mentioned, how many exactly that means for federal workers.
How many workers, how many agencies. We've also got details on the event. We will hear from Donald Trump later, not necessarily from Walter Reed. He's at the doctor right now, but there's an event at 5 p.m., an announcement, as it said, on the White House guidance this morning. Bloomberg's done some digging. It will be a pharmaceutical announcement on pricing like we saw with Pfizer recently, and AstraZeneca is the winner. We've actually been following AstraZeneca shares on a down day, holding up not too badly, down less than 0.5%. Let's bring it to the White House for more on all of this ahead of our conversation with Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman. Bloomberg's Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall is at the White House. On Tyler, what's turned into a very busy day. Let's start with the layoffs. Bloomberg reporting thousands. Do we have any idea what that number will look like and what agencies will feel the impact?
Well, Joe, that's going to be one of the biggest questions moving forward. We did get this confirmation in this post on X, as you mentioned, from the OMB director, Russ, Vought, saying that the reductions in force had begun. That is the technical term that the OMB had asked agencies to make plans for during this memo that we saw circulated in recent weeks. And that memo had asked these agencies to identify those workers whose activities are not paid for via mandatory funds or newly allocated funds from the One Big Beautiful Bill. They had also directed agencies to identify those programs that priorities might not align with President Trump. So we're going to be looking for details like that on which of these federal workers could ultimately be impacted. There is reporting that it is going to be widespread but might not hit every government agency here in Washington. It's good context to keep in mind that this is going to be a nationwide issue. Only about 20% of the federal workforce is here in the nation's capital. An estimated 750,000 federal workers are expected to be furloughed. We're going to have to see how many of those turn into permanent firings. Joe and Michelle, I'll leave you with one other statistic from our analysts at Bloomberg Economics that say that if this shutdown goes into a third week, which it does look like it's headed to, considering that they are adjourned until Tuesday, the unemployment rate could tick up to 4.7% as furloughed workers are counted as temporarily unemployed. That could now all be impacted because of this announcement from Russ Vought.
So, Tyler, as Joe mentioned, we're marking day 10 now. We've been talking for the duration of this shutdown about how unique it is that both sides feel they have the upper hand. Is something like this move today going to break the logjam for better or worse?
Well, at this point, that's really what we're waiting to see. It is ramping up that pressure. There's a few, of course, other deadlines that are ramping up the pressure here, too. Today marks the first missed federal paycheck for many federal workers. Since the Senate is going to be out until Tuesday, that is one day before October 15th, when members of the military might miss their paycheck. Also, big questions here about whether or not back pay will be given. And it's all adding to this picture, this mounting pressure. And we really haven't seen either side let up. In fact, they're really digging in, Republicans and this White House, saying that they are not going to negotiate until the government reopens. We heard from House Speaker Mike Johnson as well as Senate Majority Leader John Thune really reiterating that message as well.
All right, Tyler, let's turn to the post on China, which would have been a top story on any other day, but they're colliding, so we have to take them one at a time. He says some very strange things are happening in China, and it would take me the rest of the hour to read it. It's more than 500 words long. In summary, the president is threatening massive layoffs, as he puts it, suggesting that China is holding back on rare earths, letters that went out to many countries that give China a monopoly. And he's now questioning whether he will even meet with President Xi a couple of weeks from now. Is that meeting off?
Well, that is also going to be a big question. It's certainly in doubt. President Trump saying that he now has no reason to meet with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. They were supposed to meet on the sidelines of the APEC summit in a couple of weeks in South Korea. We'll see how this ultimately evolves. The context here is that Beijing had taken steps in recent days to unveil new export curbs when it comes to critical and rare earth minerals, adding both elements as well as technology to its control list. And President Trump is responding with this. But we know that this White House had a lot of priorities that they wanted to come out of that potential summit meeting, including making progress on a trade deal. October is only that set meeting was only a couple weeks away from November 10th. That is when the trade truce is set to expire. That is currently keeping those tariff rates lower, a 30% tariff right now on Beijing. So we're going to have to watch to see how the pressure sort of develops here, what those potential massive tariffs are going to look like. And then also quickly for your radar, of course, we're watching soybeans and what economic aid for farmers is going to look like. It's something that the administration right now is weighing, potentially is delayed because of the ongoing government shutdown. This all is, of course, connected here, but China hasn't been importing soybean imports, and that perhaps could be adding some pressure ahead of this meeting if this meeting does happen.
All right, boy, we've got a lot of questions to answer here still. Tyler, thank you so much. for walking us through all this. And we haven't even talked about the controversy over the Super Bowl halftime show. It's a pleasure to go to California to speak with Brad Sherman, and I'm sure that the congressman has some thoughts about the layoffs that have just been announced. The Democrat representing California's 32nd District, Congressman Brad Sherman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Russ Vought says the rifts have begun. Bloomberg News is reporting that they are in the thousands. Are you hearing anything more specific, and what will this do to negotiations if they ever happen, or the standoff in this government shutdown?
Look, there's no reason to do rifts now. They could have done them 2 months ago. They could do them 2 months from now. They're doing them as an act of vandalism against the federal government, as if that will take revenge on the Democratic Party for not completely ceding all power. I mean, if it was up to Trump, there wouldn't be a Congress. So few dictators want a parliament messing up their lives, except to, North Korea style, to gather and cheer. And in fact, that's what Speaker Johnson has agreed to. He has sent Congress home. Not only are we not opening up the government, we're not doing any of the other business we're supposed to be doing, much of it that we're very, very far behind in doing.
Congressman, I want to ask you, given your years in Congress, decades watching these sorts of spats go on, where do you put this into context? It certainly feels like this is an escalated tensions on the Hill right now. I'm reminded of your late colleague, Senator John McCain, joking that, if we try real hard, we'll get into the single digits on congressional approval in rough times then, 2 decades ago. Where does this fall? Are we at a new low in decorum on the Hill?
We're as low as we've been since the 1860s, and I wasn't around then. You can compare this to other shutdowns, but the level of division in the country and Donald Trump's personality and personal approach is throwing kerosene on the fire.
Well, we saw what happened with Mike Lawler getting into a shouting match with the Democratic leader. We saw Democratic senators standing in front of the Speaker's office making noise about Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know if you guys are going to start caning each other like we used to in the old days, but Congressman, to Michelle's point, you've been up on the Hill for a minute. How do you get around this? Or should we assume that when the cameras turn off, you're having a beer with your Republican colleagues?
We're not out drinking. We get along reasonably well, perhaps as well as you get along with the people where you work. But we are responding to our constituents who are divided. And so many Republicans are not only loyal to their constituents, they're loyal to the president, whatever he says, and not only technically but emotionally. That's what they feel, and it's divided. Does that mean that? If I'm walking into the floor of the House, that a Republican sticking out his leg to trip me so I fall on my face? No, that's not happening.
Well, Congressman, you mentioned Trump's approach is pouring kerosene on the fire. I want to ask you about something else today that's kind of in your lane, in the foreign affairs lane, his Truth Social message on China. How do you think this changes the game in the overall U.S.-China negotiations? How worried are you about not getting some sort of deal with China, and what are your constituents saying?
Well, they haven't responded to this tweet. It's so strange because for so many years I was here and diplomacy was handled carefully. And now it's an emotional tirade, sometimes at 3 a.m, directly from the president. That's not the way to conduct foreign policy. It's not the way any other president has conducted foreign policy. And we see China uses its control over rare earth elements, and America has done nothing over the last several years to weaken that control. We should have strategic reserves of all those rare earth elements, and we should have alternative supply. It is not true that all of the ore for those elements is in China. It's just they're the ones who have created the big industrial apparatus necessary to extract and refine them. That could be done elsewhere. But that's just one of the many things that Congress should have been focused on and should be focused on today. except
well, so here we are
here in the Rayburn building, and there are no Republicans.
I said you were in California. Forgive me. By the way, it matters right now when members are here in Washington. When's everybody else coming back? The Senate apparently is going to be here next week now. But the vibe we're getting from any lawmaker, D or R, Congressman, is that this will be protracted. We're nowhere near an off-ramp, even as John Thune suggests privately that he may offer Democrats an up or down vote on extending Obamacare subsidies. Where are we? What inning are we in this shutdown?
Well, and offering a vote if you know you're going to lose is symbolic and perhaps nice, but not all that important. This is going to last a long time. Both sides are digging in. The base of each party isn't saying, how do you put this together? They're saying, stand up for our position. And I think as long as the focus is on healthcare, and that is where we have put the focus, the people will be with us. What should happen, of course, is a negotiation. We may not get everything we want on healthcare, but the current position of the Republicans is give us what we want, and we'll talk to you about whether we do anything that you want. That's not the way to treat a party that got 49% of the vote. And keep in mind, Republicans wouldn't talk to us in January, February, March, April, May, June, et cetera, about this healthcare cliff that we're about to fall over, where 22 million people will see their premiums more than double. And the letters are going out now. People have to decide whether to sign up for healthcare coverage. And as far as they know, it's at double the premium. They can't afford that.
Well, Congressman, there's certainly no shortage of big stories to ask you about today, but we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about the Middle East and the president's forthcoming trip to the region. How are you feeling about this tentative peace deal? Are there reasons to be optimistic, bright signs here, even though it feels like we've kind of been close to this before, only to see a setback?
Hopeful. Optimistic may be too strong a word, but if the hostages are released, and Hamas is no longer in control of Gaza, then we can move forward. And it looks like that's what the settlement calls for. We'll see whether whether Hamas disarms and whether their leadership departs the region. But phase one is the release of the hostages, and that day can't come too soon.
Just got about a minute left, Congressman. If this does hold, should Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize? He didn't make it today.
Look, you'd have to evaluate Donald Trump's actions on the world stage in total. And I don't think they're quite Nobel Prize winning material. But look, Hamas has been pushed into a small corner of Gaza. They realize that Israel can take that corner as well. And I think that it's not so much what the president has said. The deal that he has offered is very similar to what the Israeli negotiating position has been all along. Free the hostages and free the people of Gaza, 2 million of them, from oppression from Hamas.
Well, he's on his way. Be there on Monday, apparently. Congressman, great to have you back. Brad Sherman, Democrat from California, thank you. Markets are extending losses now. The S&P down 2%. This is Bloomberg. Remember when the Friday news dump used to be at night on a Friday, at least the second half of the day? Now we start it in the morning. We got the Friday news dump on China, hence the market. We got the Friday news dump on the layoffs, the rifts, as the wonks call them here in Washington. Russ Vought making clear reductions in force, said to be in the thousands, according to Bloomberg News, have begun, and Wall Street doesn't like any of it. We just wonder if this is another taco trade opportunity or maybe the beginning of something bigger. Which is why we wanted to go a bit deeper with the help of Eric Weiner, Bloomberg senior equities editor, live at World Headquarters in New York. Eric, how you watching this? We know, of course, this was a market that was pretty toppy before these headlines broke.
That's exactly it. There's a lot of selling right now in the big tech stocks that really were powering the thing higher. And really, it's about taking this moment where President Trump talked about tariffs, increasing massive tariffs on Chinese goods, and that's really a sensitive point for the market. And it's an opportunity. It's unclear right now if this is an opportunity to take some money off the table and really, sort of process where things are, or if this is an outright kind of the beginning of an outright panic. And really what you need to do is sort of take a look at what happens at the end of this session and what happens over the next couple of days as things sort of play out, because we haven't seen a 1% pullback in the S&P 500 since August 1st, and we haven't seen a 2% drop in the S&P 500 since April during the last tariff freak out. So really it's about kind of where this goes from here, and if this is a moment in time or if this is really something that's going to last.
Eric, we saw soybeans also take a hit this morning in the wake of President Trump's post. Are you looking at any other sectoral equities that might take a hit for the rest of the day or in the days to come?
Well, it's really, when you look at the tariff stocks, I mean, everything is selling off. Right now, the S&P 500, there were 400 stocks that were down. So you only have 100 stocks that are up. The risk is all over the place. It's small caps in technology. Anything that grows really is sort of right now is pulling back. And you have oil falling, you have gold rising, so it's all these sort of haven situations where people, what they call a flight to safety, where people are looking at safer assets. And that could last. However, things had gotten very toppy. Things had really gotten to the point where you would question whether there was any more to come from this. So this could be an opportunity to pull back. And that's really where traders are right now, is sort of in a holding pattern where, okay, let's lighten up the load a little bit, but let's see where things stand, because, you said the word taco. The question is where this goes from here, and if the tariffs really play out, because nobody really knows exactly what he meant by massive increases. Where is it exactly? Right. What exactly is going to be hit? And that's really the questions that'll be answered over the next couple of days.
Really great to have you, Eric. Thanks for your read on this. Eric Weiner at World Headquarters in New York, Bloomberg senior equities reporter, with us here on Balance of Power. Alongside Michelle Jamrisko, I'm Joe Mathieu. It's time to assemble the panel and get their take on this. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. Jeanne is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Boy, how should we be looking at this, Jeanne? You read the long post on China, and there's not really a lot in there. He talks about massive tariffs, but does not quantify them, to Eric's point. He suggests that there's no reason to have the meeting with President Xi, but he doesn't cancel it. Isn't this the kind of move we've seen before, with big bluster before a big sit-down?
It absolutely is. And to your interview with Representative Sherman, it's not the way we normally make important policy decisions. This sort of venting, which is what this seems to be, and riles the markets, understandably, in this way, without any sort of sense as to where the United States is going to head policy-wise. And part of this is that we heard U.S. lawmakers earlier this week talking about banning chip-making equipment to China. We are seeing China post these regulations that very much mimic what the United States has done in the area of semiconductors. This is not a big surprise on China's part. They're going into negotiations with the United States. They need to have leverage, and we should have leverage ourselves. But for the president to sort of respond in this way doesn't seem like he is using the type of strategic leverage approach that we're seeing out of Beijing. And that is going to leave the U.S. weaker as we move, if we move into these negotiations. So, I don't think it makes much sense. And it's certainly not the way to do business with an equally powerful partner like China.
Well, Rick, to Jeanne's point, we've been in this sort of tit for tat for a while, including with the tech and the export controls issues that have come about between the U.S. and China. I'm wondering why today? I mean, even just yesterday, the president was saying, there are things that the president of China would like to discuss with me. There are things that I would like to discuss with him. It seemed like we were on the right track to have that talk at the end of the month. Why has this blown up overnight?
Well, I do think there's some reaction to China's moves to lock down export restrictions on some of these rare earths, some of the technologies around some of the refined products. Remember, it's not like they're just exporting a element of rare earths. They manufacture these things into usable parts, and that's what we buy. And they're clamping down on that, and they're clamping down on chips. They took the first move. And I'm pretty sure that the president's national security staff probably were pretty apoplectic about this, because every time we make a deal with them, it's with the sensitivity that China's going to keep, certain things flowing while we continue to buy their products. And the reality of it all is we have not been treating China as the adversary they are. We keep talking about them being a competitor, and they're not. They're an adversary. And I think this is probably, whether it's a device headed into South Korea, whether he meets Xi or not, or whether it's just an extension of the policy he's already had on China. But we got to get used to having a different relationship with China, and I think today's probably a step in that direction.
Well, case in point here, there is no bigger gainer that I can find in the middle of this sell-off than MP Materials. It just hit an all-time high, Rick and Jeanne, above $81. It's ahead by 13%. This is the materials, the rare earths and materials company that the Pentagon took a stake in. And we have seen others since then when it comes to lithium, Jeanne, and there's been a suggestion that more could follow. Does this codify or justify the administration taking stakes in the name of national security in rare earth companies?
It's strange when you hear about the Republican Party in the United States, the administration taking steps like that. It seems like something we would never have invited as in the Republican Party, at least. But at this point, the United States does need to take steps. And, what's so baffling about this is while Congress is sitting on the side, not doing, not even meeting in the case of the House, there are steps that can be taken. China does not have a sort of hold on this kind of rare earths. The United States has the ability, had we worked on this in the past or even today, to be in a position to compete on this. And we have not done it. We're sitting in the middle of another in a long line of shutdowns. And, the market is responding to China and this announcement. They haven't responded to the shutdown. But that's frustrating to me, because I think they should respond to the fact that when the United States government isn't working, this is the kind of result of that. And so the sort of ho-hum attitude out of the market about the government shutdown, I think, is something that we should pay more attention to, because they are changing their focus from where it should be, which is that the government has got to work so we're in a position to compete economically and secure ourselves.
Well, Jeanne, if I could follow on that, I mean, we've been waiting for a long time for the China hawks in Washington, who are usually so vocal, to come out and sort of challenge the president on what was seen as sort of a soft policy for a while, extending the trade truce and talking on a range of negotiations, TikTok being one that was taking a softer line than previous administration had. Where are those hawks, and where do you think the Democrats should be now in responding to something like this morning? Or do you think this could be sort of a blip in the radar and we return to U.S. and China are back on track, Trump and Xi will meet, in a few days?
I do hope that they meet. We used to say not just a few months ago that there was one thing that everybody in Washington agreed on, Democrat or Republican, and that was confronting China, competing with China. I hope that is still the case. I think it's noteworthy that these new curbs on China's behalf are not supposed to go into place until November 8th. That would give them time to meet and to make some agreements on these kinds of things. So I do hope that happens. But yes, Washington Congress has to get their act in order to confront China, because there is a lot of work to do in this regard.
Looking at NVIDIA today, it's down 2%. We've seen certainly worse days for the stock. I know that there's a sentiment here of negativity on Wall Street, Rick, but if we were really concerned that we were ending our economic relationship with China, wouldn't we be in a different place? This is a market that was pretty frothy, as we established before you joined us here. And this could just be another Friday when we look back on it, no?
Yeah, I think if you look at it just from the stock market in an isolation, you can come up with a lot of different points of view on it, and they could all be right. But I do think the reality of this administration is that they are in the process of decoupling with China. They have been much more restrictive on export of technologies that could help the China Red Army than previous administrations. They have been, even though many of these tariffs haven't gone into full effect, the fact that they have them on the books and are prepared to use them as a weapon of statecraft is important.
They're reacting to breaking news today. That's just the vibe here in Washington. Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, Bloomberg Politics contributors, will be back on the late edition of Balance of Power. Michelle and I looking forward to spending some time with Patrick McHenry, the former Republican congressman, and yes, Bloomberg Politics contributor, on the Shutdown next here on Bloomberg. We're spinning a few plates today because the headlines keep popping on the terminal. We started with the Truth Post about China, sent the markets south, as you just heard from Charlie Pellet. Then Russ Vought shows up just in time with the word that the rifts have begun. He says so on Twitter. We've been doing some reporting to suggest that it will be in the thousands. We're also seeing now, I believe it was Punchbowl, Pentagon expected to be spared from the layoffs. So this is not every agency.
I was going to say, I can't even remember if that's where we started with China or if all of this has just kind of meshed together.
That's right.
Of course, we've seen the markets react to both things, so it's interesting to follow today's events as they unfold.
For sure. It also happens to be day 10 of the government shutdown, which in any other world would have been our top story, with people crying as they can't get into the zoo. Although the zoo's still open, I think, at this point. I have to check on that. I was at the Smithsonian last weekend thinking it might be my last chance for a minute. All I know is, about a month ago, might have been a little bit more than that, Patrick McHenry said in this studio that October is going to be a doozy. He might have used a different word than that, but he's with us now. Bloomberg Politics contributor, former Republican Congressman, chair of the House Financial Services Committee, Speaker pro tem, the only in American history. Patrick McHenry, great to see you.
Thanks. It wasn't doozy. It was off camera, and it was more colorful language.
I thought that was right, yes. Therefore, I could have said anything, and they would have believed me. But it's coming true. When you see Mike Lawler standing in front of Hakeem Jeffrey's office with a piece of paper to get into a shouting match for the benefit of the cameras, tells us we are where?
Not yet at the negotiating table.
The performative
it's
stage.
It's a performative piece. The only thing that brings policymakers to some resolution is pain. And the announcement, it's not goodwill. Everybody's like, everybody's going to come together with their disagreements, and it's going to be goodwill that gets out of a shutdown. It never is that. It is the party that instigated it has to take the pain in order for us to get out of it. That's where we are. Usually it's been Republicans. This has been a much more chill shutdown in terms of what's happening here in D.C., like the rhetoric here in D.C., and it's because the Democratic Party is traditionally the defenders of federal employees and the federal government and federal regulatory powers. They're the ones that have instigated the shutdown in the name of a health care battle, right, a health care policy, but they've instigated it. They've been very muted about the effects of the loss of government services. They're usually the ones that are first at the press. And now you have Republicans who traditionally believe that we need to pare down the federal government, not spare anyone in the federal government. They're the ones that are saying, well, look, we need to try to make this work for as long as we can. So you see some agencies are still open because they have account balances. OMB has these massive set of powers during government shutdown, which enables the OMB director, in this case Russ Vought, to take very specific action by individual agencies and account levels to either continue normative services or, in this case, have substantial layoffs.
So, Mr. Chairman, we had House Speaker Mike Johnson on the other night, and Joe, try as he might, did not help resolve the shutdown that evening. But one thing he did ask the Speaker was, why not just schedule a vote, as the Democrats have been asking for, and the shutdown? That's obviously not in his political will to do. He was saying it was not in his process capability to do. How do you unpack that? Take us behind the scenes. Could he do that? And would it be in his interest at all?
Two things can be true at once. And in this case, Mike can be correct and Joe can be correct.
Wow.
So, yes,
I love Washington.
Everybody wins.
So what the Speaker has said is we've passed a continuing resolution. That is a normative act in D.C. Unfortunately, since the 52 years we've had this budget process, we've failed most years to follow the budget process and the law. But a continuing resolution is now the default in the fall. What the Democrats say is we have to, in order to reopen the government, you have to have this expansion of health care benefits into next year. And what Republicans have said, if you want to have a debate about this, let's have a debate about it, but we should not hold the government hostage. Now, the last government shutdown we had, it was flipped. It was Republicans saying we're going to hold a hostage and Democrats saying, no, well, once you reopen the government, we'll have that conversation, right? So these roles are completely reversed and scrambled. The process in the House would require us, the House initiating a new bill, going through the Rules Committee. There are not the votes on the Rules Committee to pass what the Democrats have requested, which is about $200 billion of new spending for next year on health care in order to reopen the government. That is a really large bid just to keep the lights on for 6 weeks. It is an absurd bid. In order to continue the Obamacare subsidies for 1 year, that was the original debate here, it would cost about $26 billion to keep the government open for 6 weeks. I mean, these are big numbers. And so what the Speaker said is, look, we'll have that debate, happy to have the debate, but I'm not going to go originate a piece of legislation in the hopes my Democratic colleagues will then adhere to their rhetoric about why we have the shutdown.
Okay.
That said, we also talked about back pay.
Oh, yeah.
The president really started something here. Hey, listen, he said, maybe not everybody gets back pay, to the point of saying some don't deserve to be taken care of. And I asked the Speaker about that, and he said, well, there are a couple different legal interpretations of that law because we all thought the 2019 law made clear that they had to be paid back when they were brought back from furlough. Are we really making this a jump ball? Is that good politics?
It's before 2019, the law changed. It's always been a jump ball.
Yeah,
it's always been a jump ball, an open question whether or not federal employees will get back pay.
Okay.
However, history has shown at every government shutdown that has ever occurred in the last century, they've gotten back pay. So these are federal employees that have signed up to do a job, and it is not their fault that the government shut down. It's not their fault that Congress can't get their act together. So I believe that Congress will have the sense to pay all federal employees for back pay, number one. Number two, I don't think there's clear debate. I don't think this is a debatable thing. The law is very clear that this is what will happen.
It seems like
and number three, you have the filibuster in the Senate, which means the Democratic minority controls whether or not the government is open. We have a shutdown right now because Schumer has the votes to withhold, to filibuster, and to stop the bill being taken up that passed the House to keep the government open. I don't think the Democrats would come to the table unless there's back pay. So there's a waterfall of things that are true here. I think if you're a federal employee, So
this is a distraction.
Yeah, it is a distraction. Now, the pain of the rifts, that's real, and there's a massive amount of not legal uncertainty, but definitive certainty on the power of OMB to take these actions in a governmental shutdown. That should be concerning to Democratic leaders on the Hill.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Chairman, you correctly predicted this would be a mess a while ago, so I'm going to ramp up the pressure on your predictive capabilities. But next week, when we're looking the days ahead, we've got the military paycheck issue as well. Is this going to be resolved next week, or is this something that waits until after the shutdown, whenever that is?
I'll take the over. I'll take the over. And every offer that everybody's that presented me with a date, I've taken the over. I think the backstop of this is Thanksgiving. I think we're going to have a lot more pain before this thing gets resolved and people come to their senses. The fact is that you've already seen Schumer lose 3 Democratic senators. It hasn't spread beyond that. But as the pain ramps up, I think Democratic politicians in the Senate will come to the negotiating table. I think we'll have a reopening, and then we'll have a debate about health care and extending some of these subsidies. And then we'll have the longer-term funding for the federal government. But it's going to be choppy waters.
This piece of paper is going to be junk soon, though, right? November 21st, who cares? If they pass it in a couple of weeks, the government's just going to shut down again. And there are many who do think that once this is resolved, we will hit another shutdown at the end of the year. We just keep kicking CRs through the spring, or what's the best case scenario? Don't say regular order.
Well, this is regular order. Continuing resolution is a normative thing in the House. 2 years ago, this was the finite cause of the ouster of Speaker McCarthy that
right?
we passed a clean continuing resolution. So this is a normative act in Washington. Unfortunately, these every couple of administrations, a normative act is also a government shutdown. It doesn't win you the policy, the underlying policy. Yeah. It does elevate your party in a political fight, and this is not about the policy. It is actually about politics. Schumer is getting hammered on late-night TV like never before. Jon Stewart, who I don't frequently quote, called him a flat tire. I mean, these are very insulting things.
Sketch. That was a bad joke, the KF.
I mean, there are a lot of bad jokes on late-night TV. Don't get me. I'm not going to get into that.
No, I mean the Schumer joke that got him in hot water there.
But Schumer's in this fight because he looked feckless and weak in March and is now trying to look like he's given a valiant fight to his Democratic base. Hakeem Jeffries is doing the same thing. So those fights, that physical confrontation you almost saw on Capitol Hill, is trying to elevate Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries to the speakership, Schumer to the majority. They need to show a fight against President Trump, and they have very little power to do it outside of a shutdown.
If a Democratic member had done that, would we be talking about censure?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, look, all this stuff, all these performative acts are fun and games until somebody opens the door. And that is always the case, right? You're like, I'm going to go fight with somebody. And you're like, well, you're on a TV. I think they're in the 2 rooms behind you, right? Why don't you go just talk to them instead of yell on the screen?
So as far as the pressure points, though, you mentioned Thanksgiving. I wonder if part of that timeline is the flights issue. Are we seeing enough pain on flight delays, air traffic controller shortages, that sort of lane that the American public cares about to have a change in the negotiations?
Yes. And this is about, again, the nature, the timing of the reopening will be based off of pain and how that maps out. And you can't predict what the pain will be like for either party in a week's time. Now, I think the Democratic Party is the one that has to fold in order for the reopening to happen, but you can see different movement based off of who is deeply influenced by their constituents feeling pain, or frankly, they go to the airport and they can't get on their flight. That is a form of pain for those of us that travel.
So you're still looking at Virginia, Maryland, with the big concentrations of federal workers to maybe crack and join the jailbreak?
Yes, but those senators, the Democratic delegation there in the Senate is.
I mean, Warner and
Jeanne
are going to go there, right? Yeah.
So
Van Hollen, not so much.
No, but you also don't know how these federal employees map out. Like if you're talking about air traffic control, disproportionately they're located in Oklahoma.
Okay.
There's not a single Democratic federal office holder from the state of Oklahoma. So you don't know how these things are going to model out.
Really interesting.
You also don't know how that Oklahoma delegation is communicating with the OMB to ensure that their people are paid. So there's all this subtlety that if you're in charge of the OMB, you can either met out pain to your opponents or help your friends. And in this case, I think OMB is being quite adept at being targeted on who they're sharing pain with, and targeting who they're helping and maintaining account balances where they need to help people.
Speaking of mapping out, it'll be really interesting to see where these all land. I don't know how long it'll take before we have that data, but we'll, of course, bring it to you here on Bloomberg. Patrick McHenry, Bloomberg Politics contributor, former Republican Congressman. Great to have you. How often when you're on the plane, they recognize you're the guy who replaced Kevin McCarthy?
Zero without a bow tie.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. And you brought it with him today. We'll meet you back here on the 5 p.m. late edition of Balance of Power. Michelle, thanks for spending time with us. Michelle Jamrisko, Joe Mathieu in Washington on Bloomberg.